Hey, everybody. I'm delighted to be introducing a very special episode of our Thought Sparks podcast. My guest is my colleague, my friend, a coworker who I've spent many, many happy hours with in places as far-flung as Singapore. My dear friend, Bill Klepper. Bill is an institution at Columbia Business School where he's taught for many, many years. And this particular podcast was filmed during the run of my Leading Strategic Growth and Change program in our beautiful facilities up at the business school. And Bill was kind enough to share some of his memories, some of our experiences together. Bill's a teams and leadership expert. Wrote a book on advice for boards called The CEO's Boss, and is just a really sharp, intelligent guy. And I think you're going to enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to Thought Sparks. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and enjoy.
Well, hello, everybody, for a very special edition of Thought Sparks, the podcast. I'm Rita McGrath. You probably knew that. And I am here with my longtime friend, colleague, associate, and soon to have moved on from his role at Columbia Business School, Bill Klepper. And a couple things to know about Bill that are very important. He has spent pretty much all of his life in service capacities of one kind or another. He was originally in government. He was the mayor of one of our local towns in New Jersey. Now, don't get excited about that. We have 556 of them.
That's right. And you can only do one at a time.
Yeah. So that's New Jersey for you. And he and I are actually New Jersey neighbors, so we tease each other a lot about our various communities. And I've asked Bill to join us on the podcast because he has such a wealth of deep experience that it would be a shame to not have him share some of those ideas. So you thought you might want to start off with the book, with the CEO's Boss?
Sure, yeah. Well, this is the second edition of the book that I wrote. When I came to Columbia, primarily my area had always been leadership development. And I was, for 10 years, teaching in that area. And the course I had was in the MBA program. And we were dealing with what were the dynamics of dealing with groups and individuals. Today, we would call it emotional intelligence and social intelligence, right? Kind of that's what we were teaching in those days. And then I kind of evolved further. And one of the assignments I got as what we would call faculty director of a program is with the Outstanding Directors Exchange, which is a Financial Times organization, which is governance. And I was asked to work with them and write case studies and present to existing board directors. Make a long story short, did a number of those case studies, and I said, this could be a book.
Could be a book.
Could be a book.
It's astonishing what things can be books.
You think so? Yeah.
It really
Now,
is.
I should tell you the rest of the story. It wouldn't have never been a book, except for a very close colleague and friend of mine. I don't know if you know Rita McGrath. Rita and I also did a lot of work together, and as a custom faculty director, Rita was part of the faculty which we amassed to work with M&T Bank, which is headquartered in Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. All part of the great state of New York. Now, unfortunately, though, they decided they would have their session in the winter.
This is 4 modules, right? So really complicated program, and runs over the course of a year. And the crowning module was going to be in December in Buffalo. Now, for those of you that don't know Buffalo, it's kind of upstate western New York, sitting right on one of our Great Lakes, and it suffers from a thing called lake effect snow, which basically means, you know, anytime from the beginning of October to mid-February, all bets are off in terms of whether you can get in and out of Buffalo.
Not a chance. So it was one of those occasions, and we're snowed in at the airport, waiting for the flight, being told we can take off. Rita's with me. We go to the bar. It's a natural thing to do if you're snowed in.
It was about the only place.
The only place you could go. I'm watching golf. Tiger Woods was at his peak at that time. Rita is bored to tears. So I said, Rita, how about a drink? Let me give you a drink. So I gave her one drink. She went through that fairly quickly.
A sign of how bored I was.
That's right. And then I said, well, Rita, how about a second drink? So Rita got a second drink. And I said, Rita, let me tell you the story about my work with ODX, Outstanding Directors Exchange, Financial Times organization, and these case studies I've been writing, and I'm thinking about a book. She looks over at me like, oh my God, here it comes, right? And I said, what do you think? Rita stopped right there, reached down, picked up her laptop, put it on the table, opened it up, and she said, well, here's what I think. In 15 minutes, she outlined the 10 chapters of my book. And I said, and you're going to write it, right, Rita? And she said, no, you're on your own, sucker. You're lucky to have it. And basically it was a table of contents. So I acknowledge in my book that if it hadn't been for Rita, and of course being snowed in, and I think it was 3 drinks by the time we got it done.
Our guilty secret stays
Yeah,
there.
that's right. But that's the story of the book and its origin.
And was that the time we actually had to take the train?
That was another time the flights would, maybe it was, the flights would not go. So we had to take a train.
To Rochester.
To Rochester and then take a train south, which you had taken before.
I grew up in Rochester, so yeah. That's
so she said, no worries, we'll end up in New York. So
Eventually.
Yeah.
So that was the
And that train, by the way, goes right past where this campus is now.
That's true.
It's the track that's out there, runs right down there.
You can see it right from
We
here.
could have gotten out early, we didn't.
Anyway, thank you for that, Bill. And it's a great book called The CEO's Boss. And what I realized as Bill was describing the book to me was that it wasn't really a book about CEOs as much as it was about the whole governance process. Right. And since that book was published, I think we've all come to realize how critical it is and how kind of neglected it is. I mean, boards to me a lot of times they're there for the wrong reasons. They're there for the food or the prestige or maybe the pay. But
there's no for 4 meetings a year, 4 to 6, they usually run off with remember, they get options now. Mm-hmm. So at a minimum, they're making $250,000. So you take, how do you do that, Ron? 5 into 250.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
That's right. About 50,000 a meeting. That's nice.
Yeah, that's great. Anyway, I thought what I would share with the folks listening to our podcast and with the folks gathered here. By the way, we are at Kravis Hall, which is one of Columbia Business School's beautiful uptown campus buildings. And one of the techniques that we use in class, Bill originated this and then I picked it up from him, is to really try to get at people's deeply held values and beliefs, because everybody has a different way of thinking about their values. And a lot of times what shapes your values are the pivotal experiences you had throughout your life. So imagine a room like this, big room with all our participants there, and we ask them to draw what we call a lifeline. And a lifeline begins with, I was born. And then it sort of follows you throughout your life and touches on what were the pivotal moments, the turning points in your life, and what did you take away from them in terms of values. And then we use that later on to craft what we call a leadership credo, which is really, if you were meeting someone for the first time who was going to work for you, or if you were trying to influence a key stakeholder, what would you tell them you're all about so that the two of you can have a productive conversation? So, Bill, if you don't mind, I'd love it if you would give us an example of your lifeline.
Just so happens.
It just so happens.
Just so happens I happen to have a copy here. Yeah, because what I tell folks is, look, I wouldn't ask you to do this if I hadn't done it myself, because I believe in it. Mm-hmm. And there are other people that contributed to this thing. It was actually my first teaching assistant came from Teachers College, guy named Mike Finland. He was one of the original. We met, talked about it. Willie Peterson was the first one to publish about it in his book, but it's also in this book. And what I give as a prescription to all boards is the first thing they need to establish, for the most part, is what they stand for. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to communicate to their stakeholders. And the best way for them to do it, and I've worked with them personally in this regard, to talk as a collective effort, what would they state as their key values? But first of all, how do you get there? And this is the lifeline. Remember, I'm old, right? So 8 decades of life. So if I start at birth, you'll be here till next year. But I start, by the way, and I'll kind of jump through it, and everyone does. It turns about your early childhood memories. And since I'm in the business school, I always talk about my early childhood memories of my experience to business. I grew up in a family business. I don't know how many of you grew up in a family business, but what you know about family businesses is that everybody works in the business, right? And it goes back further than that. Make a long story short, what I learned from it, since I was the youngest of 4 siblings, is we would never eat dinner until my father got home from the office, right? By the way, we ran a beer distributorship, so it was kind of fun to work in the business. But he would come home at night, and one of the first things my mother would say, to him as Bill, my father was named Bill, I was named after him, how to go. And then he would describe a thing called the S-curve. I didn't know it at that time. And Rita writes about it now, right? But anyway, I learned about the S-curve. I learned about the fact that life has its ups and downs, and you need to be prepared for that and react to it proactively, not be afraid of it. But then the interesting thing was, okay, if that was what I learned, what are the core values you need to have in yourself? I found out two things. One is resiliency. If you're going to work your way through the ups and downs of life, you need to be resilient. The good news is some of the best research is coming out of Columbia in this area. We're finding we as a species are more resilient than any. And so Gavin Bonanno, the guy who's doing the research from Egypt, talks about resiliency as a key factor. I wrote about it 20 years ago. He's researching it today as a key element of what makes for great, I guess you might say, leadership eventually. And then the last thing was hard work. And you might say, well, that's simple. Yeah, no, I learned hard work from my family. So I always tell people, I don't think I'm the brightest bulb in the room. I just know that. But I'll work right beside you. Long hours, long periods of time to get the job done. So that's the first part of it. And then it goes on from there. You know, I go through who were the leaders in my life. For example, when I was going through the formative stage of my leadership, there were two great leaders. JFK. And this gets to why I ran for public office. Remember what he said? Don't ask what your country can do from you, but what you can do for your country. There was another one who was marching at the time, Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream that someday my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. What did that do for me? This is through my formative years. Well, first of all, what happened to both of them? They were both assassinated, all right? So the message for me was when your heroes die, live out their dreams in your life. You have control of that. So two things came out. Service to others is key for me. And you'll find out later that's how I ran for public office. And a sense of freedom. Freedom is very key in that regard. So it goes on and on and on. I could go fast forward. How much you want to spend on this?
Whatever you think would be useful for people to hear.
Well, let me go to, because Rita mentioned it, fast forward, when it came down to finally being in one place long enough, Ewing Township, New Jersey, all right? I'm hired there as an executive officer of the college in New Jersey, ended up being a vice president. While I'm there, I decide that it's time to give back, right? Pay it forward, whatever you want to refer to it as. And so I ran for the school board. It was nonpartisan. It was one of those things, I had a PhD in education. I must know something about it, right? So I ran for office, was elected. So I was elected president of the school board, became president of the school board. I then was approached by the Democrats because the Republicans had dominated. And of course, my ego was very large at that time. And they said, would you run as our candidate? We lose, but would you run? I said, well, I can always go back to the school board. Yeah, you can. Well, you know what happened. I'd say I won, right? I won the township committee. I became mayor of the town. That's the thing where I came late to a meeting. We had a township form of government. And so they appointed me mayor for that year. So I was mayor of the town. And then, of course, what happens next? Since the Democrats are doing well in the township, I've run for county legislature. We call them freeholders then. Now, it's a bad term. It's commissioners. And I was elected to that, was president of the county legislature. So, president of the school board, mayor of the town, president of the county legislature. So 10 years in elective office. Impressive, right?
Very impressive.
Here's the rest of the story. Every year I ran for re-election in one of those jobs, I was defeated. Every year. And I thought I was pretty good. Now, what did you learn, Bill, from those defeats? Well, resiliency, get back to work. More importantly is the why. Why do you have defeat in your life? For me, in my situation, there was a guy at the head of the ticket the 2 years I lost. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Ronald Reagan. And I don't know if you know what can happen, but you can have a tremendous effect in what they call down ticket, right? Elected offices by the sweep that occurs at the top of the ticket. So it was both there. So the good news is I never put my bread on that table, but I always felt I answered this idea of service. doing that. Then I'll end with this one story. This is the end of the lifeline that I talk about, is I'm at Columbia. I'm working with, and you probably know this group, Deloitte. Deloitte is, when we started working with them, was number 6 of the big 8, all right? At this point in time. Today, by the way, they're number 1 of the big 4. Yeah. Now, we're over here at the Regal Royale Hotel, the very top floor. You ready for the date? 9/11. 9/11. I've got all these people gathered together. I'm giving my pitch. And the guy working with me, by the name of John Barch, God rest his soul, I just found out recently he passed. John was in the towers in 1993 or 6. I can't remember which exactly the year was. I don't know if you remember that, when they bombed the basement of the towers. And I always ask this question because John told me they were on the 100th floor. You knew it as the floor that Cantor Fitzgerald occupied, right? During the 9/11 disaster. Anyway, how long did it take for John to evacuate? The elevators were shut down from the 100th floor to the ground level, which he did when they bombed the basement. How long do you think it took? You want to guess?
No idea.
No idea.
10 minutes?
2.5 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now, why does that, for the most part, become relevant? If you're up on the Cantor Fitzgerald floor and a plane hits, right? What's the chances of you living through that? In that 2.5 hours, both towers had collapsed. Mm-hmm. Both towers had collapsed. Now, I'm in the Regal Royal Hotel. John comes rushing up the room. My God, a plane just hit the towers. He's, by the way, a ruddy Irishman. His normal complexion is your jacket. And he's in a situation where he's literally in what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, because he's been through this. I say, John, what's the problem? Can you tell? Yeah, plane just hit the towers. You could tell he was having flashback. I say, okay, let's take a break, folks. So we went to the back of the room. We're looking down Fifth Avenue, looking at the towers. What do we see? The second plane hit. We evacuated down to the ground level, stayed there for what was 48 hours. Nothing moved in New York City. And I'm sitting there with all the participants in this program. Now, by the way, here's the good news. Did that program rise from the ashes, all right? Was it its own phoenix? I just was flown down by Deloitte to Deloitte University in Westlake, Texas, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of that program. 25 years. I've been director for 25 years of that program. Our longest running custom program.
Wow.
Now, and I'll end with this. So what the hell did you learn? Well, nothing new. What I learned is life is cyclical in terms of the experiences. So what I learned is you have to be resilient. 25 years later, they're still doing the program. And 2 is, Bill, keep working hard. Things will work out fine. So that's the end of that lifeline.
Very, very nice. So over the years, Bill and I have had a lot of partnerships. So I tend to lean more towards strategy, innovation, and Bill tends to lean more towards teams and leadership and that kind of thing. So it's always been a lovely collaboration. And one of my favorite things that I learned from Bill, it wasn't invented by you, but you use it in class, and it's the idea of learning styles. And this made such an impression on me, which is if you think about learning, right, you've got these different phases learning can fall into. So there's having an experience, reflecting on the experience, drawing some conclusions about the experience, and then planning the next step. And these actually correspond to 4 types of learning styles that people tend to favor. So everybody's got some of everything, but you tend to favor one. So tell us about activists.
Yeah, well, that's what I am, by the way. Activist is one of the learning styles, which we said.
It's all about having experiences.
That's right. And the activist is one of those things, what part of do it don't you understand? Right? In other words, we just cannot sit and not move to action, right?
We're lost, but we're making record time.
Yes. Where are you going? I'm not sure, but we're making good time. But so the activist is in there, but where we can run into trouble. Rita's got this skill. She's under it. It's important before you act, though, is you, for the most part, try and plan.
What?
Right? Yeah, I know.
How radical.
So the idea of being a good plan in place can actually make you more intentional in terms of your action. But here's the thing. even that can be a problem, because in the ideal world, you should first start with the idea, right, of not just plan and act, but if you could start with reflection. What is it that we're trying to achieve here, right? And then move to the idea of, and so what might be our strategy, our conclusions that we could draw from that. Reflection is kind of a situation analysis. Conclusion, right, is kind of like the action, the strategy. And then you go to, what do we got to do to achieve the strategy? And then get Bill in the game, because he'll do anything once, even if it's bad, you know? So the activate. So that's the learning cycle. And interestingly enough, we each have our strengths in those different areas. And so what you want to do is surround yourself with all four. What you do is you cut yourself short. And so I always tell people, watch out for people that conclude that they're going to do something without reflection.
Absolutely.
Immediately go to then thinking about it after concluding, and then act and plan where they screwed up. If you take those, CRAP, that's what you end up with. So the best way, my opinion, is to start with the idea of reflection, situation analysis, then go to this idea of what could our strategy be based on those insights, then move to the plan, and then get to it. What do you think, Rita?
That sounds very sensible to me. So you can really get into trouble with these learning preferences. So I was doing some work with Swiss Reinsurance, which is, as you can imagine, it's a company full of actuaries and really super brainy people that look at spreadsheets as tall as that wall, and they're very happy about that. And the CEO at the time was a lovely man called John Coomber. And John was the ultimate reflector. Like you would talk to him, and he had these round glasses, right? And it was kind of like talking to the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. He would just disappear behind these glasses. And so I was designing this senior level retreat for them, and his head of strategy had this great idea. She said, I know what we're going to do. We're going to collect all these questions from the crowd, the people that are going to be attending, and we're going to have them rapid fire style ask John Coomber these questions. And I said to her, this is a truly terrible idea, because what will happen is he'll get the first question. He'll be very thoughtful about it. He will think deeply. He will carefully consider his response, and then he will respond. And your idea that this is going to be this energizing, rapid fire, she didn't listen to me, though. So anyway, they planned this segment, and just as I predicted, he gets the first question, kind of disappears behind these round eyes. And it was like the Cheshire Cat. It was like he momentarily just vanished from the room. Needless to say, that was not the outcome she desired. So that's reflectors. And the interesting thing, if you put a bunch of reflectors in a room with a bunch of activists, they will hate each other, because the activists want to get going, and the reflectors want to think about, are we even heading in the right direction? Then you combine them with the systems thinkers. These are the analysts, the people that are really thinking about how does all the systems fit together. And these are the people that don't appreciate anything you're telling them unless they can see how all the pieces fit. If you've ever worked with somebody who draws all the loops and the boxes and lines, that's an analyst. And then you have pragmatists, and all they want to know is, what's the bottom line? What do I get out of this? Now, in an ideal team, you'll have a mix of all of those styles, because they all perform something interesting. But very often what happens is we tend to invite people just like us to be part of these teams. And so you end up with a room full of reflectors. If you've ever been to a sales meeting, a room full of activists, you ever been to a sales meeting, that's kind of what that tends to look like. And they're all running around doing stuff like crazy, but is it in the right direction? Do we know what we're doing? Not necessarily. So I think that's a really fun framework that we use. So what, over the years, you've seen people's aspirations for their careers change. You've seen how, over many years of working with people, they've become senior executives. They've gotten into really good places. You've got a bunch of CEOs that you've worked with. How have things changed in your view, if they have?
Well, I do. You probably know this, is that I tried to put together what I call the integrative leadership model. It's in the book. Originally, by the way, parts of it were published by a professor here, Noah Capon. Oh, yeah. When he did a book on key account management. And I did a little chapter in there on what was then called the Klepper leadership model. And so I expanded it out I'm getting to the answer to your question.
That's okay.
And it's not, by the way, I'm not a primary researcher in the main, even though we've all done dissertations, right? But the answer is I'm a secondary researcher. So I steal from Rita with pride. I steal from other people. But what I do is synthesize. So the secondary research comes in, I'll build you a model out of some of the best thinking. And this model is built around 3 different inputs. Some of these people you will know, right? The first one is when our friend from Penn State.
Oh, Don?
Don Hamburg did a beautiful piece on the seasons of a CEO's life. Told you about the S-curve of a CEO's life, right? And then there was other research by Kouzes and Posner on their leadership challenge. They study for 25 years, executive leaders, and what in effect are the various kinds of, what you might say, practices, right, that they need to employ to be effective. And then, of course, you know me, I put in my behavioral styles material. And so I put those 3 pieces of research together and come up with a model that's built a lot off of Rita's work too, about the S-curve and what it said. So the answer to your question, typically what I find out is individuals, and we've got one here that's a great example, individuals kind of outgrow where they're at and they need to move on to new experience for a number of reasons. One is they've reached the peak of performance, or they are not being challenged, or I guess you might say rewarded even, for what they have contributed and need to look for other fertile grounds for it. And so when I talk with CEOs and seen the best of them, they're the ones that are willing that, look, it's nothing personal. It's just that in many cases, I found where my strengths are, and I can go through a certain number of what they call seasons, according to Don Hamburg. I can go through these seasons, but here's where I really thrive. Here's where I thrive. And what I need to do is find the organization that needs that skill. And I put this in the book and come down and tell boards, I say, look, don't try and make your CEO be all things to all people. You want your team around that CEO to be all things. But if you don't work it out with that team and that CEO, then be tough. That's the tough love part. And look elsewhere. Some CEOs know that they want to move on. So.
And they often wait too long.
Typically they do. You know, the irony of his research, this is Don again. He showed most CEOs can last through 2 iterations of the S-curve.
Oh, yeah? Huh.
Yeah, 2, because it's most consistent with their own style. It's when they have to stretch. You guys know the S-curve, so let me give it real quick. Can I do it?
Sure.
At the start out, by the way, now think about success on a vertical axis and time on a horizontal axis. Got the picture? At the beginning, most organizations, startups would be a classic example, they're at low success at the beginning of their life, right? And most CEOs are brought into organizations that have hit a trough, low success. What kind of leader you want there? You want a leader who's basically someone who'll challenge the status quo and embraces change. Because you sit in that trough too long, you're dead. You die.
That's right.
Okay, but let's assume they come in, they get the organization to change the strategy and to redirect. Now you come out of it, what's the leader need to do? Same old thing? You know, changing everything? No. What they want to do now is embrace what is the new desired future state, strategy, vision for the future. So they take on a different role in that regard, okay? Now you might say, okay, Bill, there's 2 moves. Yeah, but there's a third. Let's say you're great success. Now you want to be a team builder. You want to be a culture builder. And by the way, Cotter does a lot of work in this area too when he talks about, you know, what he calls as level 5 leaders. You know, they move into that role. And then eventually, by the way, what goes up, should we tell him?
Sure.
What goes up goes down. And so when things start to go down, a lot of CEOs don't want to be around. But what it takes then is usually somebody who's willing to start the new curve.
To change the status quo.
Which means, you know, you got to give the data, you got to collect it, look at the trends, and go from there. To make those kind of 4 turns, it's tough. Like, for example, I can do fine at being a visionary. And I can really embrace being a change agent. And I can embrace being a team developer. Once you get to the analytical stuff, hire McKinsey. Because it's not my game. That's what a lot of people do.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people do. Well, I use McKinsey example. I have a number of McKinsey people in my executive leadership EMBA course. They're very good at it. Did I overstate that?
No, I think that's been interesting. I mean, I'd say one of the things I would observe is that business schools in general, and this one being no exception, really took off with the financialization of the Reagan 80s.
Yep.
And how finance kind of crept into every corner of the economy. And what I'm seeing now is there's a lot of interest in, well, what other skill sets would the MBAs have? A lot more interest in the social side of things, emotional intelligence and that kind of thing. So I think maybe one message or so that, as you look back on your career that you'd like people to take away. And then I think we'll have some time for some questions from our audience, since we have the luxury of a live audience here.
Well, it's interesting. Rita knows that we had a reception in this very room last week. People gathered together, It was a celebration or a wake. They weren't sure exactly what to give me, right? But as I backed off of that, I said...
There was cake.
Yes.
There was lots of cake.
Lots of cake. That day I gave it away to my students the next day. Yeah.
Fun.
But here is the thing that I came away with it was very meaningful to me, my legacy is not what I've achieved. My legacy is those that I was, for the most part, instrumental in influencing and what they achieved. And so if I leave any bit of wisdom is, don't get too caught up on your LinkedIn page, right? And it's all good stuff, don't get me wrong. But what's more important is what individuals will say to you, that what you provided to them made a difference into what they were today. Now, I've been around for a long time. I was able to do it, but that's what I was hearing a lot of. That's the wisdom I'd give to all of us.
So maybe one story that I found quite inspiring and that was really an example of that was your whistleblower friend, who took Bill's class, got informed of his values, took a job in finance at a large institution, which I don't know that we should name. I'll leave it, General Electric in their finance division, picked up the hood on this baby and found just a hornet's nest of stuff that was not appropriate going underneath. Became a whistleblower because it was so antithetical to his values and really suffered for it. I mean, he went through several years of legal battles and, just horrible, horrible stuff. But he showed up at this thing last weekend and he really credited Bill with having given him the emotional centering, if you will, to be able to have the courage to do that. And that's not everybody that can do that. Speaking of centering,
sure.
I've got some fun things. We have an HBR article that just came out on this issue of strategic centering. And one of the things I'm seeing is changing in strategy is as we're going from this world where strategy is really connected to physical things, so you make cars or trains or household appliances or whatever it is you are, to a world which is much more digitally enabled, where services are replacing products and that kind of thing, that you need to be much more deliberate about what you're centering your company on. And so this article is about that. We have some printouts for people if you would like one. And this brings us to, I think we have time for a couple of questions, if anybody would like to ask one or comment or...
Rita,
Yeah.
you asked Bill what was different, and I was wondering what was the same. You mentioned what was the same. I was wondering what was different from 5 years ago, from last week to now. What do you notice that is different?
Is different depends on which piece of our little puzzle you're looking at. So I'd say for the MBAs, the pitch about a Columbia MBA, I don't think has actually changed that much. I mean, we've diversified away from an over-reliance on finance and consulting, but it's still, 26 to 28-year-olds building their networks, finding each other, getting that first rung on a professional ladder with, the guidance of a very supportive group of people here. I'll share a personal story. So our daughter did her MBA here at Columbia. I don't know if you knew that. Now our daughter's like a dyed-in-the-wool do-gooder. So, modern European history was her major at Barnard, which is our women's college just down the street here. Went to work for various not-for-profit organizations, ended up assisting lawyers prosecuting white-collar crime in the New York District Attorney's Office. I mean, I was like praying that this did not destroy her faith in all of humanity forever. And so she came back to Columbia. And of course, the first 2 or 3 months were just awful because she hadn't been in finance or accounting or, capital asset pricing model land or anything like that. So she was absolutely miserable in the beginning. But then the magic of Columbia kicked in, and she learned something, that after you've been through a rigorous liberal arts program, guess what you can do? You can write like paragraphs with complete sentences and correct spelling. And a lot of her teammates who actually had come in with a background in finance and all that stuff, get them beyond a PowerPoint and they're just stuck. So she developed this incredibly symbiotic relationship with the other students in her class, which I thought was just a beautiful thing. So, it's that opportunity to really grow and develop. And the role she has now, I don't think she would have gotten had she not gone through that experience. So I think a lot of the value of the MBA is still kind of what doors it opens for you, what your network still is. I don't think that's changed, at least at the top tier schools. Now, where I think we're seeing a lot of, turbulence in the market is kind of in the middle tier schools, where they opportunistically kind of got into the MBA business, I'd say in the 80s and 90s. And now what's happened is the value equation there has really changed. So what you're getting paid for when you get done is based on what you did before you took the degree. So the degree's not actually bumping you into a different level at a lot of those schools. And so they're really struggling with thinking through what they're going to do. Now layer on AI, right? And I think, and Bill, you and I were talking about this, that if you think about our job, right? The job of professors, there's a knowledge creation part, right, which is the research. Then there's the knowledge dissemination part, which is the teaching. And then there's what we do here, which is actually helping people that attend our classes do something with all that knowledge. So how do you actually use it to create a result? And I personally believe with the advent of AI, that third component, what am I going to do with this, is going to just increase enormously in importance. So I think that's one big change. Now, in the executive education area, I would say the big changes are people are having to do a couple of things. Companies aren't investing in developing senior leaders the way they once did. It used to be, if you took your first job with IBM, you got put in the V1 program, and then when you got your promotion, you got in the V2 program, and there was cohorts of people that were systematically being developed. Very few companies are still doing that systematically. So now you're much more likely to get a budget and a catalog and told, hey, you can sign yourself up for any one of these courses that you want, and that's your own development. So I think we're seeing a much less coherent approach to development. Second thing is, as organizations are flattening and trying to become faster, I'm seeing the career leaps people have to make, getting much bigger. And I love to joke about this. I'm like, yeah, it used to be you'd run a team, then you'd run a city, then you'd run a state, then they'd send you off to Madagascar, where even if you screwed up, nobody noticed, and then they bring you home again. And this was all part of your development. And we're just seeing a lot less of that. So at our level, with the people we teach, I see them being asked to, have bigger jobs more quickly with less support than perhaps they had previously. Oh, wind, how fun, wind on the 10th floor. And so I think on the executive level, these courses are actually becoming much more central and desirable to what I'm seeing people are looking for as they think about their next career moves.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So with that, we're going to have a second segment of today's model with our good friend Ron Boer.
I know the guy.
Yeah. He's a good guy to know. So, Bill, thank you so much for making the
Rita,
time.
thank you.
Thank you for your partnership and friendship, and I'm really looking forward to your next chapter.
Thank you very much. Thank you.